Alrighty, welcome everyone to ThursdAI for January 23rd. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with weights and biases, and you are on ThursdAI. ThursdAI is the weekly show that keeps you up to date of everything that happened in the world of AI from week to week. And we're here to talk about maybe one of the biggest weeks, definitely one of the biggest weeks since the beginning of the year, but maybe one of the biggest weeks in open source since Llama was released. And so we're going to have quite a conversation today with a few folks that they're going to join soon about R1 specifically from DeepSeek. And R1 is we already covered R1 on the show when it was announced and was in preview. But since then, we got it in open source. And so now R1 actually runs on my Mac, and I'll show it to you here, and runs on everybody else's, as well. And it's going to be quite a show. Also, a few other things happened. Let's maybe just like very, very gently. A few other things happened, like a small tiny announcement of $500 billion investment upcoming in the infrastructure of AI from OpenAI and Masayoshi Son from Vision Fund and Larry Ellison from Oracle. So just a tiny investment in the world of AI that was announced on like the president's third day or something. And it's been huge across the news. And there's a bunch of other open source as well. So we're going to cover those as well. I think one of the things that I want to highlight is there's also a new benchmark that just dropped called Humanity's Last Exam that I definitely would like to talk about. And oh yeah, of course, ByteDance is all over the place. ByteDance dropped a computer controlling agent with like 7 billion parameter that beats Anthropic's Claude computer use. So all of that and more, I think. And I've got some very upsetting updates from LM Arena. And you guys know we talk about LM Arena for a long time. Just now, just a second before I jump to the space, some very upsetting kind of like news about LM Arena, which we should also talk about. I don't know how verified those are. It's just like a post on Reddit, but it kind of explains a few things. So definitely worth chatting about that as well. All right, I think with this intro, I will just say what else is there to be said? Let's dive into R1. Let's dive into R1. I think we'll do a TLDR because there's like a bunch of stuff, and then we'll dive in. And meanwhile, I'll see that my host will join as well. Definitely, let's do a TLDR. I think we're good on folks. I see a bunch of other folks in the audience. Yeah, let's do a TLDR of open source, and then we'll dive in. All right, folks, here's the TLDR, everything we're going to cover on the next 2 hours, including hopefully some breaking news from OpenAI. This week started very strong with DeepSeek, aka the Chinese whale bros, the quant trading firm from China that became the number one AI open source company in the world right now, released R1, the reasoning model, in MIT license. And we're going to cover all of this. This is probably still the biggest news. They didn't only release 2 models, they released like a bunch of other quants and distilled versions on top of Quen and Llama. And the vibes are insane. This is like a O1 level model, very close to O1, if not beating O1 in multiple places at home. Also in the open source LLMs, ByteDance dropped UiTars. UiTars is by computer use model that they claim at 7 billion parameters and 72 billion parameters controls your Mac or PC, and they have an app for both. And they beat GPT-4o and Claude while running kind of in open source. Running those models locally did not work for me. I haven't been able to run this, so maybe some folks in the audience can tell us what their experience was. But the metrics are fairly ridiculous, and the examples they show are also ridiculous. And given that OpenAI is going to launch something, this is very interesting in comparison as well. And in other open source LLM news, just from today, breaking news, there was a new benchmark, a new eval that's not saturated at all. The top models on this eval is getting around 10%, which is, by the way, DeepSeek, which is great. It's called Humanity's Last Exam, HLE. So get used to saying HLE, Humanity's Last Exam. It's 3,000 questions that was written by nearly 1,000 subject matter experts from around the world. And this just launched from a bunch of folks. And then we're going to definitely cover what type of questions there are. I looked at a few. I did not There's no way I'm answering any of those myself. I need an AI to help me. But the best thing about this is not saturated at all. This is most of the stuff that I have in open source LLMs. I see LDJ just joined. LDJ, welcome.
Hey.
So we covered the open source LLMs. We're still in the TRDR, and we're moving to the next thing that we're going to talk about in the big companies and APIs, an area of ThursdAI that we cover. And this one is a big one because I think the main piece of news is this one: is SoftBank, Masayoshi-san, and Oracle and OpenAI all launched together this thing called Stargate Project, and it's an insane investment commitment that talks about $500 billion, a Manhattan project for AI infrastructure of sorts. And they have announced and signed it in front of the president. And there's been some speculation, the debate whether or not they have the funds. But generally, we should talk about what this means, because this is just like absolutely huge. If you guys remember the $7 trillion that at some point Sam Altman talked about maybe raising, this is $500 billion basically for like creating, I don't know, 100,000 jobs. Definitely a huge announcement in the big companies area. Another thing in big companies like Google, Gemini, Flash Thinking. If you guys remember, Gemini has their own reasoning model, and they launched Gemini Flash Thinking, and they updated it for this year with significant updates, plus 1 million context and so code use as well. So that's great. It's really, really good. It's really good. I don't know if like R1 level good, maybe, but like the fact that it's 1 million context for that thinker, it's also super fast because it's Gemini Flash. So they did update this. They jumped in a few evals as well. So that was great. At some point also this week was kind of crazy. Well, yeah, this week was kind of crazy. But at some point this week, there's also the whole point with Sam Altman saying the Twitter hype is out of control. We're not going to deploy AGI next month, and nor we have built AGI after all of them talking about, hey, you know, we're moving our sites to ASI. That's what we talked about last week. So it's really fun to see Sam Altman kind of like throwing a wet towel on the hype on Twitter, and then going and like announcing $500 billion investments in the next 4 years. It's really like it's really funny over there. The small potatoes there is in the big companies as well. Is Perplexity announced a new search API thing. So we're moving on to vision and video. NVIDIA released Eagle 2, which is a series of VLMs, and they were like very efficient. And then they yanked the weights. But also, Hugging Face released a small VLM today, the tiniest VLM, 256 million parameters. And that's million, not billion. They released it today in kind of breaking news. This tiny model that runs in like 1 gigabyte of RAM or some crazy things beats iDefix from almost 2 years ago. If you guys remember, iDefix is Hugging Face's vision model. It was 80 billion parameters. 2 years ago, it was 80 billion, and now it's 256 million. I found it incredible, and I just shout out to the Hugging Face folks for this launch. Folks, in this week's Buzz, which is a category that I talk about everything that happened in Weights and Biases this week. Usually, I cover our news. I cover the events we're doing. We did 2 workshops in Seattle. I did, and some folks from ThursdAI. We cover like a bunch of stuff. This week, we have state-of-the-art updates from Weights and Biases. Wait, I have a thing for this. We have a state-of-the-art. Let me say this slowly again, just to make sure that you folks understand what I'm talking about. From Weights and Biases this week, this week's Buzz Corner is going to cover a state-of-the-art update that we did. Not me personally. I wasn't involved. I'm the hype man. We broke the state-of-the-art on SweBench Verified with a in-house agent that writes code that uses O1 from OpenAI. And we're now, if you go to the SweBench Verified, SweBench website, and you go to the verified thing, and the topmost results is Weights and Biases B programmer from Sean Lewis, our CTO, sitting at 64.6%. 64.6% of SweBench Verified is now solved by O1 based programmer agent from Weights and Biases. I found it incredible. I was like very, very happy to see that, like, in this week's Buzz, it's not only about our products. I can also update you about like some crazy shit that's being built within Weights and Biases. So very, very happy about this. We should cover this when we get there. Last but not least, we have AI art and diffusion. So Hunyuan, if you guys remember HY video, the open source video that was released, we now have a 3D model from them as well, which is also super cool. You just like write some text and it generates a 3D model, and it's state of the art. It looks incredible. Not only do they generate shapes, they also have another model that colors them. And so coming from an idea or one image to a 3D model is now, it's so good. I've seen all these models before. From Stability, OpenAI had shaped it a while ago. This one is looking very, very good. We're going to show and play around with this as well. And I think maybe the last thing, besides the breaking news and everything, is going to be ByteDance. It's all over the place, by the way. ByteDance is releasing crazy I don't know if ByteDance were about to say, hey, we're going to get, TikTok banned, so we're going to just like release some stuff. I have like 2 updates about ByteDance this week, 3 last week. It's crazy. ByteDance really drops Tray, which is a Cursor competitor, which is free. So if you don't want to pay for Cursor, you can download Tray, and it will import your Cursor configs, and it will run. I don't know. They will pay for. They will pay for the cloud tokens for you. And if you're okay with sending your code to a server in China, and if you're okay with that, then you have a free Cursor competitor. It's pretty good. It looks nice. So very unexpected. Folks, I think that this is it. Like, besides the fact that, like, I need to add this here. OpenAI Operator in Pro tier is about to launch. I think that this is like 100% true right now. I've seen like screenshots already. There's screenshots of the pricing. So we're going to chat about this as well. With that, I want to say hi to some folks who joined us to talk about O1 as we're sliding into open source. Nistan, welcome. And then we also have Pietro Schirano with us in the Twitter space. Welcome as well.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
And I think that all of you joined just in time, because now we want to talk about R1. And in order to talk about R1, we need to skip to our open source. Let's start with open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. All right, folks, open source AI has never been as hot as this week. I think that this is very clear. Open source AI is the corner where we celebrate everything that happens in open source. Rarely do we get a model that beats frontier models that you can just run at home. Rarely. Like, it happened maybe twice so far, and we always talk about how open source probably lags behind some closed source models in this way or that way. This week, DeepSeek, the whale bros from China, the quant firm, released R1. They released not only R1, they released like multiple things in R1. They released 2 actual like full models, which are huge models that you cannot run. And they also released 6 distillations on top of Qwen. So they released DeepSeek R1, DeepSeek R1 0, and they also released DeepSeek R1 on top of Qwen 1.5b, 7b, 14b, and 32b. And also Llama-based 8 billion parameter and 72 billion parameter DeepSeek R1 kind of like distills, right? So like they basically trained a huge thinking model, and then they also released a bunch of distillations as well. Not only that, they released it under MIT license, which is just do whatever. Take it, distill it, convert it, train on it, do whatever. They basically just said, here's this, take it. We've talked about R1 when it launched couple of months ago, and it launched only as a preview in their UI. It did not launch as an official product back then. There was no pricing, I believe. And now, I think it was like just a toggle in their UI. But now you can download those weights, you can use them for production, you can do whatever. MIT license is probably like, I don't know, listen, if you're with me, but like I think MIT is more freeing than Apache. I think like MIT is just like literally just like do whatever you want.
MIT is like a jailbreak to the whole legal system. Pretty much. That's what most people don't realize. It's like, it's not my problem. It's your problem now.
Yeah. Take over.
Do whatever you want.
Do whatever.
I wasn't trying to hurt you. It just puts it very nicely. So
unlike like other custom, and we've seen this from a bunch of Chinese models, custom licenses that talk about only up to 100 million users, you can use this, and then you cannot use this for commercial purposes, and AU, whatever. MIT is just like, I'm removing myself as a responsibility layer from this. You guys do whatever you want with this thing, and it's beautiful that we have this like very powerful open source with that much like openness as well. We did not get any data, just the model weights, and we got a incredible paper with full of nuggets and some announcements and like just talking about how MCTS is not the way to go and grow. LDJ would love to chat with you about this as well. And also, since it launched, the amount of vibes that we got immediately that this model is so good, it was just something great to see. So we're going to talk about like LM Arena and vibes, etc. But in order to cover those vibes, we have a bunch of other folks as well. So Pietro, let's start with the vibes from your side. We have Pietro. Pietro, not your first time here, but feel free to introduce yourself to the audience for folks who may not know you. And let's talk about the R1 vibes from your side.
Yes. Hey, everyone. First of all, super excited to talk about this. I think, as you say, initially it's been like a super fun week from an open source perspective. But yeah, I'm Pietro. I do a lot of sort of like experimenting, release a lot of code bases online. You might have seen Cloud Engineers is like one of my, I guess, like most popular one. And then a lot of like different projects with the goal to sort of like really understand what we can do with those models, and like not only from a pure implementation perspective, but also from a creative way. And I think like my common thesis has always been, when you build a pipeline for AI, when you build an AI experience, just let basically your imagination run free and don't let the model actually constrain you, and just go as crazy as you can. And so one thing that I love to do is like every time a new model pops up, I try to poke it around and see like what you can do with it. And when R1 came as an API, the first thing I noticed was that they actually let you choose between the reasoning output and the actual final answer from the model. And I noticed that you can actually, so right now you can actually change the max token coming from the reasoning part, but you can just edit the amount of token that actually coming from the final answer. And so I was like, wait a second, if I just say, hey, give me like one token from the final answer, is there a way where I can just extract the thinking process from it? And actually, that's what happened. And so I was able to use R1, get just the thinking process from any question, and then send that thinking process into another model. And what I found out is actually by doing so, you made even like smaller, quote unquote, less intelligent model actually become smarter, which is a really interesting discovery. And to me, the most exciting part about that was not only we're proving that basically thinking in any shape or form actually makes model better, but there's also a world where you can actually now taking the thinking from R1 and maybe send it to a local model. And now out of the sudden, the local model performs better. And then the other thing that I love about this is that R1 right now doesn't support like common things as function calling, JSON model, a bunch like structure
It's not
output, like a bunch of other
multimodal as
stuff.
well. Yep.
It's not multimodal as well, exactly. And so you can basically just take the thinking from R1, send it to a model that has all those amazing capabilities, and now you get this really interesting Frankenstein model. They can do all of those stuff really well, like function calling, structure output, etc., but also has a thinking process. And so I'm about to release a repo about this. Somebody online give it a name. What do they call it? They
Rat.
call it like rat, which I thought was
Yes.
very funny, where instead of generation, it's like thinking.
Wait, what
So
is the thing? Retrieval augmented thinking?
retrieval augmented thinking. Yeah. And I was like, wait, it's actually, but this is what I love about like AI in general, and also like open space. And honestly, a little bit of the reason why I was upset that OpenAI didn't release anything about the thinking process of O1, because it opens up so many possibilities. And also like it's really cool from a research perspective to actually look into how those models are thinking, right? So if you look at the way R1 think about stuff, is a bit it's almost like a handsy person, right? It keeps going back and forth. It's like, wait, this is not what I meant. And it's just like so endearing to seeing like, this alien being basically like going through a thinking process. And one of the things I'm going to do right now is actually, okay, how can we now improve that thinking process because we get to see it, right? Which is something you can do with like OpenAI models,
Yep.
right? And so just overall, really solid release. It's interesting how China is basically like streamrolling in terms of release. As you say, like I actually just tried the ByteDance AI editor is really, really good. The thing is like I had experience working in big American company for a while. Like I worked at Uber, I worked at Facebook, I worked at OpenTable. And what I can tell you, it's like those guys in China, they just don't stop. Like, they don't go through sort of like the relaxation that some American companies have, right? And so it's really hard to keep up with them. And so it's very interesting to see how the market is shaping around these releases.
100%. Thank you, Skirana. I love that. I love the retrieval augmented thinking. I love the fact that you can transplant like the thinking process into another model, and just the fact that like the amount of stuff that we can do now that we have like this model is open. I think it's great. So thank you for joining. Stick with us, dude, because we're still talking about R1 and the crazy amount of like stuff that we got with R1. I will just go through some of the evals before we jump into like some other vibes and some other things we can do with this. So just in terms of evals, folks, just the stuff that they've posted, but also some other evals because we no longer trust. R1 is getting 79.8% or AIME 2024. AIME is like competition math compared to, I don't know, they added O1 preview and the previous DeepSeek, and they're beating everyone else on AIME right now. This is probably the non-distilled version of R1. Code Forces, they're pretty much up there with 96%. Math 500, which is like, we know that math is saturated as hell, right? So like, we're not gonna get too excited by math. We're going to talk about other benchmarks that are better. But just like looking at this graph of evals, the fact that we got an open model in open weights with MIT license that gets 79% on AIME competition math, 90% on MMLU, 49% out of the gate on Swebench verified. That's not near close to Soda, but like, hey, this is just like a one-shot crazy thing. Just an absolute beast of a model just based on the regular evals. But as we know, Nistan, here I would tap on you to talk about the vibes, and maybe Ray also you as well. Just evals in the paper is not enough. We've seen models come and go, and we've seen folks post these evals and then the model itself does not perform as well as we want. And we've seen the exact opposite as well. DeepSeek has been consistently, since we've been talking about DeepSeek Coder, since forever, DeepSeek has not ever, as far as I remember, Nissan, failed us in evals to vibes ratio, and they didn't fail us this time. What's your take, Nissan? You've played with it.
It's pretty good, but you have to throw away the thinking part, and now a lot of the interfaces that are coming in do hide it. With DeepSeek, you do actually have to hide it because there is a lot of redundant information in there. It repeats a lot of things many times. But no, the evals are spot on. What surprised me the most was the 1.5B. I did not expect that one to be good at all. I ran the 1.5B locally, and it was doing stuff in Erlang. I was just grabbing the final answer because it was so fast. And yeah, so far it checks out. I threw some code at it. It wrote an entire Tetris game too. I was just like playing it for like 20 minutes just to test it out. It all worked. The score was working. And I also tried the exact same thing that Pietro did. Sorry, I have construction outside, but I use like a 78B model that I made, like a commander model that has all the tool use, and it's also fairly smart. Like, it's not leading edge smart. And I grabbed all the reasoning steps from the 32B and I threw it in the other model, and the other model was also way better with them. So far it checks out. It looks good.
I will just say,
use it. Yeah,
Nista, I will just say, you mentioned like how good the 1.5B performs. The thing that they mentioned is DeepSeek R1 Distill Quen 1.5B, which is a mouthful. DeepSeek R1 Distill Quen 1.5B, which is the distilled version of DeepSeek on top of 1.5B, outperforms GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 Sonnet on math benchmarks with 28.9 on AIME and 83.9 on math. So there's this 1.5 billion per like model, given the reasoning powers distilled down from the huge model, performs better than 4.0, performs better than GPT-4o, like the flagship model for OpenAI that they've like spent millions of dollars of training. This is 1.5 billion parameter model that now does this. It's absolutely insane. This is like this makes no sense, and it makes sense in a world where how should I say, reasoning is built into the models and distillation is like a beautiful thing, but just like for anything else, it just doesn't make sense. Let's talk about some other evals, and then we're gonna like skip on and chat about like some things from the paper and how things work for us as well.
But by the way, I highly recommend people, if you're gonna run it at home, honestly, the 7B and the 14B are pretty good. I ended up just finding old boxes, old GPUs that I had. I slapped them on there. I left the 14B and the 7B running overnight because they take a while. And I mean, a while like on CPU. You can just leave it all night, just running at whatever problem you have, and come back in the morning. You actually have an extremely capable model. I am very surprised that now you can actually have it on pretty cheap consumer hardware, as long as you just leave it aside. But yeah, I tried Arch Linux for the first time. I just slapped it on a couple of boxes, and I just got LM Studio. I just got their image, and that's all you needed. Everything just worked.
I tried LM Studio, and I have a tip for folks, because LM Studio is great. It's great. Like
you don't need to install the drivers. It comes with CUDA inside.
Yes.
So just use like any modern Ubuntu or whatever you have on it that is like a newer kernel for the OS, and then just slap LM Studio. You have a RAG API, you have tool use, and you have the things. I feel like I'm getting old. I don't want to set all that stuff up. I just fired this thing. It's good. And it's very self-contained. It doesn't make any outside API calls if you don't want it to, unless you're downloading the model. Yeah.
So I tried LM Studio as well. The thing that I got from LM Studio on the 32 billion parameter model was around 5 tokens per second on my Mac M3. And then I saw this tweet from Georgy Gerganov, the G-Goat from GGML, that posted a snippet, like 2 lines snippet that I'm showing right now. Like, brew install llama.cpp, and llama server, you download one model, and then you download another model for speculative decoding. Because if you guys remember what speculative decoding is, for folks who don't, speculative decoding is a way to kind of like help a bigger model by kind of like using a smaller model to search super quickly to the space of possibilities, and this speeds the inference significantly. And so Georgi posted this snippet that you can use because the models are the same. So the Qwen 32B and Qwen 1.5B both are pretty much the same architecture. You can use the smaller one to like run speculative decoding for you. I got like 10 tokens, 11 tokens per second, up from 5. So if you just run the 32 billion parameter model, that's like 1 speed. If you use speculative decoding, it's significantly faster. And I use that. I wish that LM Studio is going to support speculative decoding, but this LM Studio thing was like, the Llama CPP thing was like super, super great. It launches a chat interface. You can chat with it. Also great. LM Studio is great. Llama CPP is great. And the whole thing about open source is we're now getting all these things, and we're going to talk about everything else that we got from R1 already. So we chatted with Pietro about the rat retrieval augmented thinking process, but we can chat about like some other things as well that I already saw. LDJ.
By the way,
go ahead.
Just really quickly, with MLX, this is only code that people hack together. With speculative decoding on MLX, you can end up to 80 TPS for a 32B. So it will take like a few weeks or maybe days for all of that to get integrated in. But yeah, speculative decoding is the way to go. Honestly, with these models, the very interesting thing is that because it's reasoning stuff out, you can leave it running quantized because it's going to think over and correct itself, right? So even if it hallucinates a little bit more, just because of the massive speed bump you get, it's worth it to just run it faster quantized. And I'm looking forward to what the benchmarks come out with this just running very, very quantized, because again, it's reasoning, it's self-correcting. So you're
basically saying we can quantize the models down, but let them think for longer. And because of test time compute, it will just like achieve better results just because they run for longer, right?
It'll be like twice as fast.
Yeah. All right, LDJ, you had a comment as well. We haven't chatted about you, like, and I want to specifically talk to you about like the paper stuff. I don't know if you read them, but you had a comment from before. Feel free to chime in here.
Yeah, sure. You Yeah,
Get in
you were
here.
mentioning LM Studio, and I was just going to mention I talked to some of the guys over there recently, and they do plan on actually implementing speculative decoding natively into LM Studio soon. So that
Yes.
will be cool. And also, there's the concept of daisy chaining with speculative decoding, which I think will maybe become more popular, where you basically have, let's say, instead of just a 32B and a 1.5B, you also throw like the 7B into the mix. And so for things that are actually a little bit too hard for the 1.5B, then it can offload to the 7B while still not having to fully go to the 32B. And so you kind of get even this extra speed boost from having to use the 32B even less now. And that's even more efficient.
Yep. LDJ, I wanted to chat with you about just like some other like things you saw from evals, but also from vibes. What is your take on R1? Did you see this moment that they talk about the aha moment? Did you happen to like catch this conversation about them getting the aha moment from the model, but also aha moment for the researchers?
Yeah, this was really interesting. It seems to mirror a lot of what like I've talked with people kind of privately and also from what I've heard around with OpenAI and the people working on O1. And it really does seem like the best way is to kind of have this method where you let the model just kind of go towards the goal of reaching a certain correct outcome, and you just iteratively and continuously have this reinforcement learning process that can scale, and then eventually you have this emergent phenomenon of these aha moments coming from the model, and the model just kind of learning on the fly how to question its previous strategies, how to develop new strategies in a single output, and all those things.
Yeah, I love that they framed it as like this was an aha model for the model itself. So it like it learned to allocate more thinking time to a problem by reevaluating the approach, and then also aha moment for the researchers saying that like they don't need any fancy like Monte Carlo research, and I think that this is like the highlight of the paper, at least from the top, right? Like you don't need some fancy like Alpha Zero type research into this. Like this works just by scaling the RL, the basic RL, the reinforcement learning techniques to get to this level. And they discarded. They talked about what didn't work, and they talked about they tried MCTS approaches, and they ended up not needing any of this. This is like simple RL scaling for and then thinking. And like it turned out to be incredibly great. So I think vibes are
Yeah,
immaculate. So the thing that I wanted to cover as well is not only did we get a model that's like incredibly performant, we can talk about evals all the time. Like eval from Zeophone is great. Like there's a bunch of like live code benches. R1 is getting very close to O1 as well. We have this eval somebody sent from Olama of every distillation version compared to like the O1 Mini and Cloud Sonnet, and it's crazy. Like even the tiny models like 1.5B and 7B are beating like Sonnet 3.5 on AI.me, right? Because again, Sonnet is not a like reasoning model. We know that AI.me like competition math needs like is getting better used by reasoning, but it's crazy to see these numbers, folks. It's just like absolutely crazy. I do want to talk about like API performance and for coding as well. We have Ray here. Ray, you watched this Aider polyglot benchmark, probably you saw this, and then also the price performance for this is incredible, right? Like we saw the price performance for R1 compared to getting very close to O1. The price performance is ridiculous. We're getting like 14 cents for million tokens input, and that's not cash. Cash is even lower. And $2 for 1 million output compared to $60 for O1, which is gonna go down, but still, like it's like 50 times cheaper than O1 while getting close-ish to the results. You've been playing with this. You've been probably coding with this. I saw you went live with Cursor coding that's now implemented this.
Yes, yeah. So Cursor just added the model. So now if you go into the model settings and just go to DeepSeek and just go ahead and check mark that, you can actually do a conversation in chat to actually see the reasoning tokens, which is I actually find very helpful for generating plans. And I've also just used it to refactor some code. So this is actually going to be the moment I feel where we're going to do the anti-slop movement. So I think DeepSeek is going to go in and get the slop that's been generated by Claude Sonnet and some of these other models and actually clean it up, which I found really impressive just in one shot, actually. It's like, hey, I just gave it some vibes-based type of things. Like, here's this file that it was generated. It looks too complicated. I want a simpler architecture. Can you just please review and generate a new plan? And so it basically does the thinking and it does the reasoning. And it's really impressive as far as how it does that. And then it generates new types of interfaces and things. So right now I'm coding with TypeScript using Next.js. And I'm just really blown away with how impressive it's been able to just refactor that. And then in Cursor Composer, you can actually copy the chat out and put it into Composer and have it do its thing. The unfortunate part there is, like you're saying, it does cost $20 a month for Cursor to use this in the premium model, but you can use this with OpenRouter, like you're saying, and you can use it in other IDEs outside of Cursor. So that was something I was exploring as well with VS Code. So you can use VS Code, and then there's another one called continue.dev. Just hook it up with the OpenRouter, and you get the exact same API fee that you're saying there, and do this exact same exercise, and then to apply the files and so forth. So yeah, I'm really impressed with how it's thinking through. And I think the other part that it unlocks for those who are coding is by looking through its reasoning, you can actually see it kind of stepping through the code, which can help you as well. So if you're not really too familiar with the code base, just by watching it step through the code, you can just start copying those code snippets and start finding them and kind of tracing through the code yourself to debug components or go deeper on a bug. Maybe you're not really thinking about it in a certain way. And so just the initial vibe check, like you're saying, for me, I'm actually really excited to start to go refactor a bunch of code and bring it in because of that large context window, to be able to do that finally, right?
How big is the context window? I don't actually have this in my notes, but
I think it was like 100-something thousand tokens, like the 100K tokens type of thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, we need to distill it. I think 128.
And on OpenRouter, they give you, I think, 60K tokens. So I also made an app called LLM-Calc. And so for those who are wondering, big ups to Niston, because he kind of gave me a review on how I should do the calculations for like the token window or the context window and these other things. And it's open source, so you can go play with it. And if you're trying to configure and figure out how much VRAM you need for your context windows, that could be super helpful because there's people who are running 8 gigabyte MacBooks, 16 gigabyte MacBooks, and your context windows are going to be really, really small if you're running some of the smaller models and stuff. Yeah.
So I went, thanks, Ray. I went to check super quick what's the context length for this model, and some folks are commenting that it's like 64K. I was like, yeah, 64K. No, that makes sense. And it's not that much, but Ray, you said 100 something. So DeepSeek, the actual API, offers 64K based on OpenRouter, but we have Hyperbolic and Together AI already support, and Fireworks already supporting R1. They already put R1 on their things. They're getting significant lower throughput. So like 12 tokens per second, unlike like 15 tokens per second. But they're allowing 164,000 tokens.
Yeah, I was going to say that. The model itself in the GGUF file, I also saw about 165K.
Yeah.
The architecture of the model, I think they might have trained it or extended it up to 160.
So that's incredible. And then I don't know how...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
For the coding and agentic stuff and for SWE bench, you do need longer context. People were saying that they often were running into issues, even with the regular DeepSeek API when it was cutting out at like 60,000 something. Oh, and the other thing is they trained the distilled models to 128K. So now you already, without Yarn, so you already have that at 128K, even though 1.5B is trained up to 128K. No one's tested that.
Is there an input and output limit as well? Did they mention?
I think outputs is, I don't know. I think we need to test.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
Yeah, OpenRouter's max output is, I didn't find it super reliable because when we talked about the 1 million model from last week, and they talked about like OpenRouter mentioned like 1 million output, and I doubt it was 1 million output. So I'm not sure that like we can trust OpenRouter's mentioning of max output because some of them say max output 131K. I will say though on this topic, and LDJ, I wanted to get to you before I move to the like what people can use this for because of open source, but feel free to comment and then we'll move on.
Yeah, to mention on the output tokens point, on the DeepSeek V3 paper, they did mention all the benchmarks are capped 32K output for reasoning. And I'm not sure if that's the hard limit for how much you could actually use, but at least in the benchmarks in the paper, that's what they say the cap they used is. And I guess the 100K, 164K, I think that's just the total conversation limit you have.
Yep. All right. So the thing that I wanted to highlight is because, folks, when we talk about open source, it's not only about running these models on your own hardware, which we can now do, although the distilled models probably, but we can now do, or companies like Hyperbolic or Together, all of them can now put this up on their servers. You can also run this on your hardware if you want to. If you're a company and you have GPUs idle, you can run DeepSeek if you want to, although the requirements for the bigger models are hard. Open source also allows all kinds of crazy shit. All kinds of crazy shit. And so one of the things that I found like very interesting, super quick, is this thing from Google, where Google decided to implement a reasoning effort knob. Do you guys know, like, remember that like OpenAI's API for O1, I believe O1 does this. I don't know if O1 Mini does this. I think O1 Mini doesn't do this yet, but I think they mentioned that O3 Mini will do this. You can specify reasoning effort. Essentially, if you think about the test time compute, kind of like the longer it thinks, the better it like performs thing, you can tweak the longer it thinks with the reasoning effort, low, medium, and high. You cannot do this with DeepSeek. DeepSeek doesn't give you this effort, but because it's open source, people just like hacked it together. And the way they hacked it together is genius. Basically, the sampler, which takes kind of the top tokens and then decides, okay, like this is the next token that I'm going to show. They replaced the sampler and said, where like every time it gets to the end of thinking token, there's a specific token that says end of thinking. They replace that token with but wait, or wait but, or something, right? So like they replace this token with another like text that says like thinking, and this tricks the model into keeps thinking. And so you can ask like a very simple question like, what's 1 + 1? And then it will do like 57 thinking tokens. And then if you do this sampler thing and you just like keep replacing randomly the end token with wait, but, and and so, and like different things that like keep it thinking, the model will just keep thinking. And then like in this example, they got thinking tokens of like 173 thinking on top of 57. So basically you can control how much the model gets into just like the loop of thinking. And I think that they ran into the maximum limit of 160,000 tokens in the end for this like one simple question. It goes into loops and goes like all kinds of crazy shit. But I just personally love that not only can we see the thinking itself, which is incredible. Like I'm pretty sure that this is like possible as a custom sampler or whatever. There's not a lot of code here, although I did think that there's a Git repo for this. I'll add this to the show notes, folks. By the way, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, the sampler, whatever, I'll add this link to the show notes. This is a GitHub gist basically that allows to replace the sampler with the end token with something else, and you can keep going forever. I don't actually know if this improves performance. I don't think that everybody done evals on this. So I don't know if this is quite like the reasoning effort or is just like faking it, but we should test this out. We should do some evals. Alrighty, folks, we've been talking about DeepSeek for an hour. Any last things that we haven't talked about, folks, in the comments? Maybe anything that you want to know about R1 that we haven't mentioned? Anything important here that we haven't like mentioned?
Oh, shout out to
Sam.
Yeah, we're gonna get there, but it's just like R1. I just want to wrap our.
No, just shout out to Bartowski because it took him like all nighter, 2 days to make the quants for the full one, and he even made a 1-bit, like a 1.5-bit one that's like 140 gigs. So I think that one just puts out gibberish, but he put the time to make all the different quants for the full model. So it will be interesting to see at what bit rate it becomes smart. Like probably I'll guess at around 3-bit, it might actually be pretty good, even with all the hallucinations factored in. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, right.
Sorry,
so,
the reason I was mentioning humanities last exam is because DeepSeek got #1 on that benchmark now.
Yeah, so I think that this is a great transition out of R1. Thank you, Ray, for joining. I know you have to hop as well. Cheers. Let's move on to the kind of the next thing in open source before we jump and talk about like a bunch of other stuff that we have to talk about, and it's already an hour in. Let's do a smooth transition. DeepSeek R1 also, not only are the vibes immaculate, but also we have this new benchmark that was released today. So shout out. We're not going to use the breaking news button because it's going to happen before the show, but it's okay. It's called Humanity's Last Exam, and this is a very unsaturated benchmark. As you guys know, we talk about benchmarks all the time, MMLU, math, all those things, and they are always they're getting close to saturated. Like math is at 98%. Saturated, I believe, at 99%. MMLU is saturated. And we talked about frontier math, which is an attempt to have a very, very hard math problems. And like, I think back at the release, the top models were getting only like 2% on those, and then O3 was released and said like, hey, we're getting 25% already. And so now it's always good to have new benchmarks that are unsaturated, and the researchers at OpenAI get very excited about those. This new benchmark, this new data set and benchmark is both a public one and a held back set as well, so to prevent overfitting. It's called Humanity's Last Exam, or HLE. I think, remember this name. I think we're going to talk about HLE a lot. And the tradition, LDJ, that you mentioned is that already they showed, as they released it, that DeepSeek R1 is the top performer, even beating O1 on this benchmark with accuracy of 9.4. So imagine how hard this benchmark is if the top reasoning models that we have right now, outside of O3 that didn't launch yet, are getting less than 10% completeness on this benchmark. The benchmark is composed of math at 42%, physics 11%, biology and medicine 11%, and other questions, computer science at 9%, just like size of the data set. And so it's 3,000 questions across hundreds of subjects, including those percentages that I told you about. Some of them are public release, some of them are private test set that held back, and more than 1,000 subject matter experts contributed to this thing. And I just want to show and talk about some of the questions, because they are quite crazy. As far as I will not be able to, without DeepSeek, to answer any of them. Let's take a look at Humanity's Last Exam. Lastexam.ai is the URL. Humanity's Last Exam. Here's a question. It shows they're also multimodal, but there's a question here that shows like a Roman inscription, and the question is: here's a representation of a Roman inscription originally found in tombstone. Provide a translation for the Palmyrene script. A transliteration of the text is provided. And so they give like a transliteration of the text. So this is like a question that comes from Merton College in Oxford, and they mentioned the author. And this is like one example of the classic question. Translate Roman scripture. There's also like a bunch of math questions that I will not bore you with. There's physics questions. They look crazy hard. And the dataset, supposedly the dataset also shows the answers as well. Let's actually look at the dataset. The files, blah, blah. Can we see the files actually? Oh, agree and access repository, dataset card. Yeah, like this. So they have the questions, they have images, image previews, and they have the answers. So they do have the answers. So we can we can do evals on this dataset. There's answers on the dataset, and then main models are getting just a little bit of just 10%. I think it's lovely. And listen, we always talk about new benchmarks. I think this one is great. I don't know why it doesn't load, but yeah. HLE, folks. Remember HLE, and then R1 from DeepSeek is now currently the leader in this, and we're gonna wait until O3 is gonna get released, which is supposedly very soon.
Have you guys ran it at 1B?
Not yet, no.
It would be. I mean, we're always looking. Everyone is for like a nice, easy to run, somewhat trustworthy benchmark. Right now, I mostly just use PQA and either the math or the medical ones here and there. So if this is like fast to run, it seems it's only 160 megabytes. This will be interesting. Oh, it's only 3,000 rows. So it's only about 3,000 questions. Yeah. Okay. So GPQ is like 1,500. This is not bad. This is pretty good, because MMLU is 65,000. It can take a while. So yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward if somebody has some easy way, or if it's an LM eval harness. I
think that's going to get built in. And folks, remember HLE, because we're now getting like a very, very good benchmark, and very non-saturated. 10% is great. I actually want to see which 10% it answers. Maybe now that we have R1, maybe we should run this on weights and biases and test it out. I'll let you know, folks. Maybe listen, I think it's a good idea. All right, what else do we have in open source? I think we're done with open source. Let's move on. Oh no, of course. One other thing happened. There's a tiny thing happened in open source as we're like moving towards almost an hour into the show. ByteDance released something called UiTars, and that also kind of blew up. Although I wasn't able to run this, I will say that I cannot actually confirm how good this performed. But ByteDance released UiTars also in open source. They claim state of the art on computer use. So if you guys remember, Anthropic released computer use we're due to get programmer at some point, although it seems less and less likely that we're going to get programmer today, although it is. There are examples of programmer floating around, and there are examples of, like, if you're
You
on
mean
the pro
operator?
tier. Operator, sorry, yeah, programmer is something else. We're going to talk about programmer in a second. Thank you, LDJ. Programmer for OpenAI is supposed to be a thing that controls some stuff. I'm not quite sure if that's going to control computer, but supposedly. But meanwhile, in the open source, we're getting UiTars from ByteDance. It's a state-of-the-art that beats Anthropic computer use model. Actually, two models, 7B and 72B, and they claim that on different benchmarks, they improve previously to their, like, UiTars previous, but also they beat GPT-4o and Claude on like pretty much all of the benchmarks that like Visual Web Bench and Web SRC and Screenshot QA. There's a lot of benchmarks here that I am not familiar with, like Android Control Low and MM2 Web. Like, the whole world of benchmarks in computer use is like throughout, so I'm not like familiar with them like that much. But I found it like very interesting that they claim Soda with like a very small model. Wasn't able to run this. Now, the thing that was awesome is that they released two models. I think they released four models, SFT and DPO as well. But they also released an app that you can run on your Mac, and this app is basically connecting the dots, right? If you remember when Anthropic released computer use, they didn't release any apps. They just said, hey, we've trained this example of Claude for computer use. You can run this Docker. Completely on to you if you want to run this Docker, and this Docker will run whatever, blah, 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 open Firefox. These folks released an app. It's called the UiTars desktop app. And then this app basically allows you to execute the mouse clicks and keyboard clicks of the thing that UiTars is basically like telling you. Although they did find that there's issues with the GGF models with quantization, so they removed it, looks like. But yeah, because people were complaining that it doesn't actually work, and they removed it. But if you have enough GPU resources, that's what they're saying, you can deploy the non-GGF versions, and this model will be a state-of-the-art computer use model so far, if you can deploy this in the open source. And I'm pretty sure that this is like Apache 2 as well. So you have an app, you have two models that control your computer, and I think there's also like one like in-browser agent or something. Super cool. I'm waiting for an actual thing that will control my computer that I can trust. Open source makes me trust it a little bit more than a bigger company. I don't know, Nista and LJ, what about you? But I want to hear comments about this. And also, folks in the audience, if you ran UiTars, let us know if this works for you. LJ, go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of Westworld benchmark, I'm a little bit familiar with that, and it's generally there's kind of some classes of computer use benchmarks that are more browser focused, and kind of others that are more operating system control focused, like how to go into the settings and properly change this thing in the operating system, this and that. And so it seems to score especially well on those types of operating system desktop type things. On the other hand, like the leak benchmarks for the operator OpenAI model, it kind of loses in that benchmark to this. However, it scores better in like browser control specifically.
I've spent quite a bit of time on this stuff since Open Interpreter came out. I was also doing similar things on my own. I think it will get there. This is stuff that we actually need to see, like, what's your final product that you can do with it? Like, you have the little 9-year-old girl making apps, and it's like, okay, this is cool.
You mean
this
Faye,
does
right?
cool stuff.
Yes.
But then you have literally every other agent company that doesn't really do anything. So anyway, it's pretty nuts that they actually just give it all out as stuff. I would use another machine. These things are not safe to tell people. I might actually just delete your data if you by accident. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the OS is not really set up to handle it. But yeah, this is Apache 2, right? Is that the license?
Yeah, there is Apache 2.
It's pretty. It's pretty nuts. The main model itself is pretty capable. I don't know. I'll give it a little bit before we actually start seeing useful stuff out of this. I would say expect a lot of hype coming forward. There's going to be a lot of
agents this year, control your computer, especially when program operator gets released and people are like, oh, I'm not gonna paying $200 for that because apparently it's in pro tier only. I will just say, Nistan, one thing that is worth thinking about. They also mentioned that you can run this with mid-scene.js, which is like an in-browser agent. And so it's a JavaScript AI powered like SDK with like controlling the page, the assertions, blah, blah, blah. Browser environment is a fairly safe environment to be in. So if you want to run like a new Chrome instance, install this there, and then have it access only the stuff that you are okay with, that is kind of like a Docker on its own. Like you can encapsulate and be fairly safe if you run this type of automation only for web in a browser. The browser environment will not delete your computer files. So you can do that. So only if you like log into the places that you want to log in.
And just quickly, one last thing. Remember that this needs to generate, I think it's like a few hundred, like 200 something or 300 tokens every time it's taking a snapshot. So you do need a somewhat powerful GPU to be able to handle the 300 tokens input in. So for example, it just doesn't work well on CPU only, even if the model's very small. So yeah, just keep that in mind. You do need a somewhat fast GPU, and then you'll get the benefit of it.
Yeah.
The browser one, I'll actually, I'm gonna try that one.
Yeah, go ahead, OJ.
Yeah, I agree. Like people don't want to usually have to set up their own virtual machine, and the browser method and having your own browser profile set up for it is good. But apparently what they're doing for things like Operator, which I think other companies will start doing too, is actually they're basically having like a custom browser system kind of built into the ChatGPT interface. And so you go into this operator mode and it actually has this type of like dedicated browser window inside of ChatGPT for the actual operator system. And then it has like all your logins that you want it, all the payments that you want it to have access to. It's all managed within there.
Yeah, it's like when we hacked Open Interpreter and we saw the entire Kubernetes container with all the stuff in. I mean, this is what the code interpreter. Sorry, this is what code interpreter was.
Yep.
It was like a 16 gig container that let you do all of this stuff inside. You just had a very limited interface. So now they're going to add vision to that, which makes sense. Yeah.
Somebody just told me that we have potentially breaking news from ByteDance.
Oh,
I put something in the chat, by the way.
Yeah, that already. Do a bow.
Well, not that. Like something like kind of different breaking news.
Oh, okay. You want to go with different breaking news?
They just quickly, Sam just announced that free tier is going to get O3 Mini.
Oh, that's dope. O3 Mini is that? Oh, O3 Mini is very, very.
That's
good.
insane.
That's insane.
That's nuts.
Yeah, it's like O1 level. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
O3 Mini on the high is like, wow, that's crazy. The thing that I wanted to mention is like still in the open source. We have a lot of open source here.
Just really quickly, shout out to Small LM team that just made the smallest vision language model, which is like half a gigabyte now. Actually, no, the smallest one is like 200 something megs, and you can see. So that's
okay.
That's cool.
So let's chat about that super quick, and then we'll conclude with the open source. Nissan, what you're mentioning is Hugging Face released small VLM, which previously they released small LM, and now they released small VLM, which is the tiniest vision model that you can run. It's 256 million parameters and 500 million parameters. So 0.25b and 0.5b basically. If we're measuring in billion parameters, they're like 0.25b. The incredible thing they're mentioning is this 0.25b billion parameter model outperforms an 80 billion parameter model that they released before from Hugging Face called IDEFIX. So just like to show how quickly this tier progresses, it's tiny, small. Just so from like 16 months ago, 17 months ago, they beat the performance on IDEFIX. It has Onyx checkpoints, so you can run this in the browser. So I'm pretty sure that like right now or like tomorrow, this will already run. It runs on under like 1 gigabyte of RAM. It's crazy.
Any old camera or toaster that has 400 megabytes of RAM left can run this now.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Folks, we're gonna do a small reset and just say that we've covered the open source piece. If you missed any of this, you're on ThursdAI, and if you missed any part of this, you can follow up with the podcast that's going to get released available everywhere you get a podcast. Just look for ThursdAI. We upload this podcast every week at the end of the show, or at the end of the day of the end of the show. And so if you've missed any piece, feel free to follow up with that. There's also a newsletter at the same address, ThursdAI.news. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is to share it with friends, come to the live shows, but also give us 5-star reviews on the podcast mediums. Meanwhile, I would just say for folks who are new here, that we're here every week for the past coming up on 2 years, folks. It's going to be 2 years in March, very, very soon. We should probably celebrate the 2 years anniversary of ThursdAI. And we keep you up to date on everything that happened. And my name is Alex Volkov. And the reason why this show keeps happening, at least from my end, is because I work at Weights and Biases. And I will just do this thing where usually I give my co-hosts a little bit of a break, and I talk about this week's buzz, which is a segment of the show where I talk about Weights and Biases achievements, results, products, etc. Not this week, Nissan, stay around with us, because this week we have a state-of-the-art announcement from Weights and Biases, and it's super cool. So let's go to this week's buzz and talk about this crazy announcement from Weights and Biases. And we're back. We're now at the Weights and Biases corner, but now I have my co-host here to tell you all about this week's buzz. And I was really surprised by this as well. I will tell you, I got a ping maybe I don't know, a day before about this in Slack. It was like, hey, we're about to release this thing. What this thing is a new agentic framework that's called WNB Programmer. That's kind of internal. It's going to get released. I'm hoping very, very soon. That's beating one of the top benchmarks for agentic frameworks for coding, Sweetbench Verified. So Sweetbench has been around for a while. Sweetbench Verified, I believe that this is a OpenAI's like condensed higher tier verified version of Sweetbench. And so this week from Weights and Biases, we have announced that we are now the leaders on Sweetbench Verified, which is insane. With two of the top three places, 57.4% with programmer with O1 high, and wait. So we have breaking news. I hear we have breaking news with programmer launched 3 minutes on YouTube OpenAI channel. What? That's crazy. Okay, we're gonna tune in, folks. We're gonna watch this thing together. Somebody send me a link. Jens, the person who just showed this, send me a link. We're gonna watch this together. Meanwhile, I'm gonna cover the Sweetbench. The thing that was achieved here with the programmer with WNB is specifically the fact that we're using the reasoning models O1, and we paid a lot of money to do this, but also the fact that other agent frameworks, they're not necessarily geared towards O1 use. We've talked with OpenHands, we've talked with Crew AI as well. Reasoning models and agent frameworks don't really mix together, or at least they didn't used to. And Sean, the CTO of Weights and Biases, was able to figure out how to best utilize reasoning models to get this incredible achievement. And so we have a blog. I'll add this to the show notes as well with a bunch of examples. We didn't share all the learnings yet, and we will. Hopefully Sean will come to the podcast. I just was very excited to see this. At the leaderboard of Sweetbench Verified, the organization that got 64.6% is Weights and Biases. So shout out to
the third place. They called it midweight agent.
Yes.
That's
really funny. There's a very specific set of rules of how to run this, and so this is what we submitted it, and then cross-check 5 is also it checks across five examples. So shout out to Sean Lewis, the CTO of Weights and Biases, for this incredible achievement. I just want to shout out the leaders of Weights and Biases are incredible. The previous thing we mentioned from a co-founder was OpenUI. It's got super viral. It's also another co-founder, and now this thing, and also just incredible. The Weights and Biases observability tooling that we use was used for this, and so the way he was able to get this is by tons of iteration and evaluations and learning from multiple things. I think he ran 1,200 different evals to get to this point and learn and tune the prompting work. So some of this work will get released.
I'm interested if you can share some work on, or if anybody knows, do you just submit an API to SWE Bench, or do you submit I don't think it's a model, or do you just submit a Docker and then they run it? I just want to know what the
What the submission criteria is?
Yeah, because I'm basically just running open hands with a 7B overnight and a 14B just to see how far it can get on just random compute I have laid.
I honestly no idea how the submission works. I only know that like we're right there. All right, folks. I think we don't want to miss the OpenAI stuff. We're gonna be live stream in 5 minutes. Introduction to Operator. AI breaking news coming at you only on ThursdAI. Breaking news. Just now I got a tweet from Sam Altman saying, doing an OpenAI live stream right now. First intro to Operator. And then this is what we're going to watch right now, folks, together, live on the show. And let's go.
So I just sent you the link right now in Twitter DMs, the benchmarks that we could pull up while we're waiting.
Nice. Let me take a look at this. Give me a second. I need to make sure that we are. And by the way, thank you to Leonard and our community for like letting us know that this is happening before Sam Altman did. I love our community. Folks, we're gonna watch the Operator live together.
I think the most impressive benchmark seems to be on Web Voyager, which is a browser control benchmark, that it slightly surpasses human performance on that benchmark.
Web Voyager.
Yeah, so it gets 87% on the Web Voyager benchmark, allegedly according to these leaked benchmarks, which I have confirmed is actually on the OpenAI website in the website code. It gets 87% on that benchmark, whereas the average human score is apparently 85.3%.
Oh, wow. Oh, it starts.
Oh, here we go.
Something exciting for you today. We're going to launch our first agent. AI agents are AI systems that can do work for you independently. You give them a task, and they go off and do it. We think this is going to be a big trend in AI and really impact the work people can do, how productive they can be, how creative they can be, what they can accomplish. We're starting today with Operator. Operator is a system that can use a web browser, in this case a web browser in the cloud, to accomplish tasks that you give it. And we'll show you a demo in just a second, but it's really quite cool what it can do. Just like you would use a web browser, you can get pixels in, you can look at a screen and control, an Operator can do that and then control the keyboard and the mouse and do all sorts of things. This is going to go live today in the United States for pro users, and it'll be other countries soon. Europe will unfortunately take a while, and we'll also in the coming months make it available to Plus users.
Right, thanks Sam. Hi, I'm Yash, this is Casey, that's Ray, and we work on the computer using agent team, and we're so excited to show you Operator today. As Sam said, Operator is an early research preview. It will do a lot of cool things. It also makes mistakes, sometimes embarrassing ones, but let's show you what Operator can do. Okay, so this is the Operator homepage. And as you can see, the interface is very similar to ChatGPT. You can type in a prompt, and an Operator will try to execute the task to the best of its capability. You'll also see we have a list of pre-filled prompts here. To give you an idea of what Operator can do, we have also collaborated with various brands like OpenTable, AllRecipes, StubHub, Uber, Thumbtack, DoorDash, eBay, Target, to make sure Operator really works well on these websites. Yeah, in this case, I'm asking Operator to use OpenTable to book a table for 2 at Beretta. Beretta is a restaurant in San Francisco. It's great. You should try it out. And at 7 p.m. And I'm using OpenTable in this case, but I could have easily said, just do Beretta, and it would have probably gone to search engine, figured out how to make a reservation as well. But let's see what it does.
So can you explain what's happening in this?
Right. So I'm going to expand this a little bit. So as soon as I typed in the query, Operator instantiated a completely remote browser. This browser is running in the cloud somewhere. And as you can see, it's already up and running. And my hands are off the keyboard. I'm not typing these things.
So this is just the AI is clicking around.
AI is just clicking around. It started this browser session. It knew where OpenTable website is, which is opentable.com. As you can see, it's summarized chain of thought here as well, which is it's gone to the URL, searched for Beretta. And something cool really happened, which is for some reason, OpenTable thought we were in Virginia, and it auto-corrected itself to San Francisco. This is using, so like ChatGPT, in Operator, you can also give custom instructions. So I'm going to show this really quickly here. Okay. So I've given a custom instruction that for queries that need it, I live in San Francisco. So Operator recognized that, and then auto-corrected itself to go to Beretta. Okay, looks like 7 p.m. isn't available. But you know what? 7:45 is just fine. So we're going to go do that. So in this case, operator came back, and this is a really good example of task delegation where operator needs help or needs assistance or just wants to ask you something. It'll just come back and you answer that
So
query.
in practice, you wouldn't have had to watch this. You could have just let it go off while you're doing other things. Then it would come back and say, hey, I can't do 7:45. Yeah.
And we're starting with a web app. You'll get notifications, etc. When operator moves into mobile, you'll get mobile notifications, much like interactions we do with general apps. Okay, yes, that's great. Let's do it. Okay, so again, very simple interaction as you would have with an assistant, which is, hey, I found a reservation, 7 p.m. wasn't available, let's do 7:45. And again, you can see operator at this point has said, okay, should I? Again, this is a really good example of the confirmations work we're going to talk about a little bit later, but before doing an action, which is sort of irreversible in this case, you can cancel the reservation, obviously, but again, taking a critical action, operator is asking us before actually doing it. And in this case, I'm going to say, let's do it.
Oh, grocery.
Yeah, I love groceries. So I've
Set
been
up
using
PlayStation
Operator to
5
shop
to
all my groceries. I love to
33
cook
Charles
quite a
Street.
bit, and I have been using Operator exclusively for groceries. So I have a shopping list here, which is
And a 5090
this one.
apartment.
Let's see what it is.
1205.
Eggs, spinach, mushrooms, chicken thighs, chili crunch.
And so this is a picture that you're uploading here.
That's exactly right. And I'm going to use Instacart, which is again what we use generally. Can you buy this for me, please?
So now that you've seen a bit of Operator, let me talk a little about the research behind it. So Operator is based on a new model we've trained at OpenAI, which we're calling the Computer Using Agent, or KUA for short. So KUA is a model built off of GPT-4o, but it's also trained to use and control a computer in the same way that humans can by just looking at the screen and using a mouse and keyboard to control it.
This is just using screenshots, no API, nothing, just working.
No API, yes. And that's where KUA comes in. By teaching a model how to use the same basic interface that we use on a daily basis, it just unlocks a whole new range of software that it can use that was previously inaccessible.
And so this is keyboard and mouse, right? It's kind of using keyboard and mouse just
Exactly.
like human would.
Yes, and that's really what the KUA research project is about. It's about removing one more bottleneck in our path towards AGI and letting our agents move around and act in the digital world.
Okay, so what I can do at this point, and I'm going to just click this button called Take Control. So this remote, as we were talking about, like operator fires up this remote browser to do it. We almost think of it as a surface area where operator can work and then I can work. For example, in this case, I took over control from operator, which is also key to sort of how we think about user and user controls. Like at any point in time, a user should be able to take control and give operator instructions or tell a little bit more, guide a little bit more, et cetera.
It is one of the first agents that we're putting out in the world and which has real world side effects. And so we thought carefully about how to deploy this safely. The framework we used to think about this was one centered around misalignment. So for example, what if the user is misaligned? So maybe they're asking for a harmful task, like buy a weapon or something like that. In that case, fortunately, we've done a lot of work with ChatGPT to bring over a lot of the same mitigations. So for example, we refuse harmful tasks, including harmful agentic tasks. We have moderation models, we have post hoc detection, we have blocked websites. And I'm kind of rattling off these mitigations, but that's really how we think about it. It's this stack of mitigations that each incrementally reduce the risk to the point where we feel comfortable deploying.
So all the confirmations that we're saying, hey, do you want to reserve the restaurant?
Yeah,
should you
exactly.
buy the tickets? Those are all examples of the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm about to talk about the confirmations. So another area of misalignment is if the agent is misaligned. So if the model makes a mistake, maybe purchases the wrong item or books the wrong hotel room. For this, our main mitigation is confirmations. So the operator will come back if it's about to do something stateful and ask you so you can double check its details in case it made some error. The third area of misalignment is if the website is misaligned. So maybe the website is fraudulent or it's a fake website, or maybe it's literally like, operator, please wire me $100. We obviously don't want to follow those instructions. So we've developed our model to try to avoid those instructions and not follow them. But if that fails, we also have a separate layer on top. This is what we call the prompt injection monitor. Think of it as like antivirus that kind of observes and watches your trajectory and sees if there's anything suspicious. If it does, then it pauses it. So we feel pretty comfortable with our approach.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of cool demos, but again, we want to remind you that Operator is a research preview. It will make mistakes and it is not perfect. That said, we can look at a few benchmarks and kind of quantify how good Operator is right now. So one of the first benchmarks that we're going to look at is called OS World. OS World is an eval that measures how well AI agents navigate common operating systems like Linux. On this task, KUA gets a 38.1% score, which is higher than other publicly published results. Human performance in this task is 72.4%, so we still have room to grow, definitely. The other eval we'll take a look at is called WebArena. WebArena is an eval that measures how well AI agents navigate some common websites like e-commerce websites or social forum websites. So on this task, Kua gets 58.1%, again, higher than other publicly published results, but still falls short of human performance.
Still a way to go.
Still a way to go, yes. One thing that's important to remember about WebArena is that even though it's the web, we're still just giving it the same universal interface of screen, mouse, and keyboard. We're not giving it any extra information that might help it do the task, like the raw text of the web page or information about which buttons are clickable. And all the information it needs, just like humans, is just in the screenshot.
And so right now, obviously, in Operator, we're using the browser, but I could use the model with the computer as well, with just Ubuntu or Mac or whatever else.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, in the last, I don't know, 15 minutes, I think I did all my errands for the week. Got my groceries,
Very productive.
tennis court booked, cleaners coming, hopefully. End of the day, everyone on Pro in the US will have access. But also, we're working on the API. This model will be available in the API and will be launching in a few weeks.
Ooh.
You guys, congrats. This is incredible work. So excited to get this out. I think people are going to love it. It's early, as we mentioned, but we have a long and great history here of early research previews developing into products that people really love. So this is really the beginning of this product. This is the beginning of our step into agents, level 3 on our tiers. And we can't wait to see how people are going to use this and to kind of work with us to figure out where exactly it should go. So again, congrats. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, folks, there you have it. Operator from OpenAI was announced, and we streamed it together with you live. What do we think?
Yeah, you go ahead, Niston.
I think they're underselling it. I mean, I do want to talk smack about it, but I feel like they're quite underselling.
They were very reserved, but it looks
Yeah.
insane. Yes, it looks insane. This is like...
But yeah, it has issues and stuff. I was thinking, again, I don't know if it came in the chat, but I was like, yeah, just operate. Just send 2 PlayStation 5s to 3 Charles Street and maybe a GPU too. I'm just trying to think of... Okay, for this, you do actually need AI safety. So
yes.
Now you do need proper encryption and not having like backdoor stuff that like anybody can take advantage of, especially now that it's going to order stuff. This is the next step. It's the next step where it starts making financial transactions on your behalf. Like that's a big deal. It's like what the crypto world has been talking about for 15 years, but actually
like an actual safe one and not like a crazy one.
Like not for drugs, for food and
for food, yes, for cleaners to home. Folks, that was yeah, I think that this is like a huge thing that we just saw. The first agents from OpenAI, level 3 autonomy. They're going towards level 3 autonomy on their like levels of AGI. They're like Sam Altman is talking about level 3 autonomy. We got Operator. By the way, I just paid $200. I don't know about you guys, but if this is not coming, if the mountain doesn't come to Muhammad's gonna pay $200 to use Operator. This metaphor did not land, but I'm trying to see if we can play with it live, and maybe we're gonna get it in a second. Because right now, I kept using operator.chatgpt.com and kept redirecting me to ChatGPT, but now it's just blank. So I think that it should work in a second. Yeah, I'm getting a 500 error.
They also did mention that the Plus users, the $20 per month users, will be getting it in the coming months.
Oh, I think I have it. Ooh. All right, you guys want to see?
Yeah, sure. Perfect, yeah.
Yes.
And I really like this, the fact that they included things like human averages inside of the benchmarks. I think that's something like human baselines, human averages. Like I hope that's included more in future benchmarks and allows people to actually kind of like see, like especially for agentic benchmarks, for robotics benchmarks, like how close is it to actually various human abilities. And I think right now there may be just kind of releasing something that's like barely soda right now. Like I don't think this is cope. Maybe I'm coping, but but I feel like they probably can have something like that's significantly better than this, but just like slower and more expensive. And so just rolling this out, and I think just like the O1 and O3 paradigm, we're probably going to see over the next 3, 6, 9 months, we're going to see this get significantly better, I think.
Yeah, I think that like they didn't mention anything like reasoning related. They did say that the model they called KUA, which is computer use agent, is trained on top of GPT-4, I believe.
Oh, they said that?
Yes, I think they
cool.
said like this is like a
Okay.
level, but it's not reasoning, and it's very interesting that like this is gonna have some jumps as well.
It did have reasoning steps in there, so they probably incorporate that somehow.
Yeah. Right. So, folks, I think that there's a bunch of other stuff to talk about until we wait for Operator to actually try it out, which I would love to do on the show, but it doesn't work right now. Let's summarize the announcements. So, OpenAI just released their first agent, their attempts at first agents. It's called Operator. Underneath, it runs by a model that they effectively call KUA, computer use agent. They kept referring it to it as KUA, which is great. And it does tasks for you in a browser that lives in the cloud. So it's a completely secure environment that sits inside a cloud somewhere. They're using Chrome. You can interact with it. So there's the human interaction piece. You can go and you can say, hey, operator, pause, I want to take over. The points at which you take over are points, for example, when you enter a credit card, which one of the presenters did, and they showed their credit card, but it was blocked. I don't think he knew it was blocked, but it was blocked with a black rectangle there. And at that point, he was able to edit the credit card and actually book some tickets, I believe. And then he probably going to have to cancel this credit card. Operator seems to be performing incredibly well on benchmarks, state-of-the-art benchmarks of the year, we said. Not quite breaking off, away from what we saw before, but very, very close. And now there's a pop-up that's going to be rolled out in a new few hours.
Cat on the couch.
Yeah, I saw a cat too. Yeah.
I have a cat. That's a level 5 autonomy.
Level 5 autonomy.
Yes.
What's the cat's name?
My cat is Sonia. She never appeared on stream before. No. She's usually chilling. So let's talk about the benchmarks itself. There's like 2 benchmarks that they shared: OS World and Web Arena. LDJ, I think that we saw other benchmarks at the leak, right?
So, I think there's only one other benchmark in the leak, and I think maybe they didn't show it because they didn't want to scare people, because that was the only benchmark that was beating average humans.
Yes.
And maybe they didn't want people to kind of get their expectations too high from that benchmark too. But the other 2 benchmarks they showed.
So the 2 benchmarks that we're seeing that they share with us about using computer, one of them is web related, one of the computer use and web browsing agents, OS World and Web Arena. And so they claiming that the previous state of the art on OS World was 22%, and they're getting 38% with OpenAI KUA. And Web Arena, the previous state of the art was 36%, and they're getting 58.1% on this benchmark. Any of those benchmarks were mentioned in the UI TARS, by the way, or we haven't seen. Let's take a look. So previously, folks who are joining us right now, we've talked previously in the show about UI TARS, which is a ByteDance agent that kind of does similar things, the same, controls your computer, etc. And they claim state of the art with UI TARS, and I just want to see if they mentioned any of these benchmarks because
in OS World they did mention it, and it beats computer use from OpenAI in OS World.
So who beats who? Good benchmark.
So UI TARS. So the only benchmark they have in common is OS World, and UI TARS beats OpenAI in OS World.
Yeah, so UI TARS is the ByteDance open sourced 72 billion parameter model. The open source state of the art that just came out today claims 22% for 15 steps, and OpenAI just told us that they got
38.
Oh yeah, they did actually mention the 22. They did mention UI TARS. Wow, incredible.
Also, everyone was right.
Actually, I think the previous soda. I think UI TARS is maybe just tying the previous soda on that 22%, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and because the true soda for UI TARS seems to be 24% actually.
24.6. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like with using like a ton of steps.
And 50 steps, yes. 50 steps.
Which is going to be obviously way slower than Operator, probably.
Yes. Okay, folks. So we're correcting ourselves mid-flight here. We're trying to. If you're joining us right now, we're like a bunch of people just joined us right now to see what's going on. I think we're at 5,000 people now watching the stream or have joined the stream. Welcome. We're trying to figure out how to get our hands our very interested AI hands onto the new agent that's called Operator, and we tried to confirm that OpenAI released a state-of-the-art updates, and they did on those two benchmarks, OpenAI OS World, and Web Arena. But for now, we're gonna continue with the show because there's a bunch of stuff that because of this breaking news we didn't get to, and the thing that we have to talk for now, we're talking about the other huge thing that happened this week in the world of AI, which is this incredible announcement, which is a building out AI infrastructure in the US, a partnership between OpenAI, SoftBank, Oracle, NVIDIA is definitely going to be a key partner in there, ARM, Microsoft, and OpenAI. They're talking about 2% of the US GDP going towards AI infrastructure. I think that's insane. I wanted to hear from Nistan. You're Canadian, so you don't get a voice. I'm just kidding. LDJ, what do you think about this one? Sorry, Nistan, I'm just kidding.
So yeah, I think that this is really cool. I was following it very closely. There's a lot of details I can't talk about, but I'll stay high level for now. Yeah, so as you can see on your screen, actually, MGX, which is actually, I believe it's a fund from Abu Dhabi, so they're involved in it, and then as well as a funding from SoftBank. And this is actually technically a new company that's formed called Stargate. And OpenAI and these other companies are technically equity funders in Stargate, but the purpose of the company is labeled as being for the purpose of infrastructure for OpenAI. So it seems like it is very specifically for OpenAI. OpenAI will be in charge of operating it. And yeah, it sounds like a smart way to actually kind of get funding and investment for infrastructure without actually having to give away OpenAI equity, because you're basically just giving away ownership in the infrastructure itself.
Mm-hmm. So like they're talking about the initial $100 billion deployment and then $500 million commitment. That's $500 billion. If you guys remember, Sam Altman talked about $7 trillion at some point. So this is not quite there, but you know, it's a huge investment in AI infrastructure in the US. AI infrastructure means everything from, you know, data centers, and they talk about like one of the largest data centers. Larry Ellison talks about this. They also talk about, you know, potential power investments, etc. This means a lot for the upcoming age of AI, AGI, ASI for in the United States, and it's quite incredible to see this happens. The tension happens because, you know, different parts of the political spectrum and government are fighting, but this is not what we usually cover here, and I would love for us to focus on the technical stuff.
That's fine, but you have to know this impacts it because Elon's accusation was there actually isn't money for this. The money isn't there. Sam claims the money is there.
Yeah.
And so I think this is going to be really, and then it goes to who's going to foot the bill on some of this stuff. So it will actually have a distinct interest as to how this comes out. I'm sure there's a little bluster in it. I'm sure there's a lot of reality in it. It's super exciting. But I think more and more clusters and that sort of competition can only lead to greater things.
Yeah. There's the whole thing where, you know, previously Mark Andreessen talked about being in meetings in the government, that the government wants to basically control AI with like 3 companies. This kind of deal didn't happen in the past like few weeks. So I gotta wonder, I saw some folks raising the questions whether or not this was related to that conversation with Mark Andreessen. Mark Andreessen then left and said basically our only choice then to support somebody else, and you know, open source is the true north as well. I don't know what this means to open source. This like is an insane investment in AI. This could be controlled more and more by the government because like government is involved. This is private sector, so government is involved to some extent, but this is private sector.
Yeah. One last note I just wanted to mention quickly: the live broadcast that Altman did today was from their Virginia offices, I believe. And I think he's going to be spending a lot of time in D.C. There is a meeting, as I understand it, scheduled with Congress. I think it's a closed door, not available to the public meeting on January 30th. It has been supposed that, you know, they were going to mention some improvements or their advancements in AGI stuff. So just keep that in mind. Gravitation has just moved to D.C. in a significant way for all of technology.
Yep, absolutely. And it looks like, you know, the new administration is taking a very big interest in AI, obviously, because it's going to be like a big thing of going forward. So this is Project Stargate. Nistan, go ahead.
I think Masayoshi Son's, I think his interview where he was asking, how do you recoup that investment? That was some time ago. That was, I think, a few months ago. And he said that if the LLMs and VLMs and robots are to actually make a substantial improvement in society, not like hot machine bullshit, just like pitch deck slop, like actual things. Like it's it can fix a bridge, or it can manage a power plant or a sewer plant, stuff like that. If that is to happen, then the benefit to society would always be more than 5%. So if that increases GDP by just 5%, then this investment more than pays for itself. And as critical as I am as this like oligarchy or just like censorship communism of just like two companies that I like very heavily criticize, I think at the end of the day, this is accelerating, and this is a good thing. Like, you need more power plants, you need more GPUs, you got to build stuff out. The population is getting old. So I don't think at the end of the day there's like any actual substantial drawback of doing this at all. Like, as much as I don't like it, and I think open source is going to probably mog it, and you're just going to get smaller models that run for free, you could still use the compute. So I don't see what's wrong with them building 10, 15, 20 new nuclear reactors.
Hopefully this will go towards power plants as well. One last point on this is that today from the information, they said that OpenAI, SoftBank each commit $19 billion to Stargate data center venture. So it's going to be focused on data centers specifically. And then Swix, our friend, shouted out that like OpenAI total raised money so far, it was like $18 billion. So it's unclear where from the $19 billion that they're committing to will come from. Very, very interesting how this is going to work operationally. So this is Project Stargate project. We will probably hear a lot about this because like it's going to be like huge supercomputers built out in the United States running for the purpose of OpenAI. One thing related to this is that Microsoft is also somewhat involved in this. And very funnily, there is a quote from Satya saying that when asked whether or not they have the money, Satya said, "I don't know the details about that deal, but I know I'm good for my 80 billion." I wanted to highlight the fact that the person can literally, without just like, becoming red, just say, "I'm good for my $80 billion. And he just said this like without sweat. I kept watching this video and I was like dumbfounded. And also the fact that people are thinking whether or not this is like the end of OpenAI, Microsoft, very good relationship because this kind of like Oracle's involved now and there's like a bunch of other stuff. It looks like they're still committed. The one thing that also was announced kind of during the same time, kind of quietly, is that Microsoft had, like, OpenAI could only run on Microsoft hardware clouds so far, with the exception of like a small Oracle thing. They removed that constraint just also during that announcement, or like during that time with a separate announcement. I saw that like OpenAI is no longer confined to Microsoft server if they don't need to, but Microsoft will have to approve this. The thing I wanted to land is Microsoft no longer has for OpenAI stuff in terms of clouds. It will be able to approve other clouds in which Microsoft OpenAI will exist. As far as I remember, this was like one of the conditions for achieving AGI. I just wanted to like bring this up and mention like one of the things where, yes, the definition of AGI based on Microsoft and OpenAI's agreement was $100 billion in revenue generating a product, but another one was Microsoft exclusivity for OpenAI will end when AGI was achieved. And we kind of quietly got the news that Microsoft's exclusivity for OpenAI's stuff is ending. AGI much? Basically. But Sam Altman poured a wet blanket on this. We're not going to launch AGI in the next month. I think the exact quote, I will read this because I think it's important. He said literally this. Let me show this actually. He said, where's this? Yeah. Twitter hype is out of control again. We're not going to deploy AGI next month, nor have we built it. We have some very cool stuff for you, but please chill and cut your expectations 100x. Sam Altman tweeted this on January 20th. On January 21st, he announced together with Oracle and Masayoshi-san a $500 billion infrastructure deal. And on January 23, he announced level 3 autonomy agents. So I don't know about lowering expectations about 100x, but yeah, AGI expectations, Sam Altman confirmed that they haven't built AGI. I don't know which definition of AGI he uses. LDJ, go ahead.
By the way, Alex, I have to go at 2, but can we quickly talk about the new Gemini?
Yes, we have to mention this. LDJ, go ahead, and then we're gonna go to new Gemini, and then I think we'll cut it there.
Elephant in the room, I feel.
Yeah,
like.
So with Stargate, just like a couple things with the funding. So apparently it's $100 billion for the first year for the first phase, and then $400 billion afterwards. And there's a lot of controversy around, oh, do they actually have the money, this and that? And apparently it's later confirmed that OpenAI, and from some form, whether it's debt financing or whatever, OpenAI is supplying 16 billion of it for now.
19.
And that's 19 it is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for correcting. And then I believe it was another 16 or 19 from SoftBank. And then MGX seems undisclosed still how much Abu Dhabi MGX is supplying, but they are listed as an equity investor too. But right now they said they are already actively constructing it in Texas, Abilene, already 10 buildings underway and another 10 buildings underway in the next few months.
Yep. Alrighty. So, folks, we covered Project Stargate project. We covered infrastructure. We have a few more things for us, and we'll see if Operator is live with us or not. Justin, super quick check for you if Operator already showed up for you or not. Let us know.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Right, folks. So the next thing we have to talk about is the battle of norms for reasoning. So we know that Norm Brown just went to TED.ai and talked about O1. O3 is about to get launched, at least O3 Mini. At some point, they keep hyping this up. We said at the beginning of the show, we have a confirmation for O3 Mini is going to get free for all ChatGPT users, right? That's what we confirmed as well. The other, so this is like Noam Brown is the guy who worked very hard on reasoning, like at least one of the folks. The other Noam is Noam Shazir, one of the core Transformer Papers people, and who came back to Google after a while in character AI land, and he apparently works on reasoning in Google. And the reason we know this is because, first of all, they paid a lot of money to bring him back, and the second reason we know this is because he only tweets when Gemini thinking involved releases are happening. He doesn't tweet about Gemini Flash Experimental 2.0. Like he barely talks about this. The only tweets from Noam Shazir we get is when they update Gemini thinking. So listen, let's talk about Gemini thinking. Folks, Gemini thinking is Google's experimental reasoning model that does the same kind of, deep learning trained chain of thought thinking processes, etc. It's very, very good. It's extremely fast. It's way faster than O1. It's probably way faster than R1 because it runs on like Google's insane, TPUs. They have updated an experimental version of that one, Gemini thinking experimental updated. I don't think they just give it a date. They don't give it a name. So they had a 12.19 version, which is December 2019, and then now they have 21.01, so 01.21, so like January 21st. This model jumped in capabilities in a very significant way that we should talk about, and then we should talk about like how it actually behaves. I actually used it on AIME, the competition math, from December 19th till now. And remember that unlike OpenAI probably and like XAI, Google folks go on vacation. Most Google folks go on vacation during the holidays. So like there's not a lot of time for this. They jumped from 65% to like 70, almost 74% on the AIME math, competition math. And in GPQA, which is science and hard facts, they jumped from like 66% to 74% during less than a month. It's less than a month, including holidays in between, right? So obviously the machine kept training. Not only that, this is now the first reasoning model in the world that has 1 million tokens in the context window. They enabled the crazy, I don't know what Google is cooking over there, but they enabled the crazy context window length for the reasoning model. So you can drop like full repos and have them reason for you, which you can do with github.gg, for example. They also added code execution abilities, so now it can actually run code in Python, execute it, and then you can see this. I used it on some of my repos, just dump full repos in there and have it reasoning through them. Nistan, what was your take on Gemini thinking, the new one?
Yeah, I've said it a few times that Google is like the turtle. It's funny to say turtle in here because it's going at 400 tokens per second.
Yeah, this is a fast turtle. This is a very fast turtle.
It's still, figuratively, somewhat speaking, Google's still the turtle that might win the race. But this one is scary good because they also added 65K output.
Yes. And
it's at a speed which is very crazy usable, and it got all the really, really hard math questions on the first try. When like first try, first reasoning, perfect answers, and very fast. The whole thing was done in 10 seconds with the thinking steps. Dude, this model, I think is Google's scariest model by far.
Yes.
They've ever built, ever. This thing, I don't like how good it is. Like,
This smells AGI-ish.
I don't want to like it, but it is what it is. This is.
Where are you running this? Is this in AI Studio, or are you running
AI
it?
Studio, yeah.
Is it 3 or 2 flash experimental? Which one is it you're
Flash
talking about?
experimental 0121. Oh, the thing that I did, and if you guys remember, we only just talked about UiTars and their desktop app and how it's coming from China, whether or not you're going to run desktop like things that are originated somewhere else, etc. And it's like scary. I literally just took the whole repo and just dumped this into this reasoning machine. It's 181,000 tokens. It's more tokens than the whole context window of R1. R1 is, we said 164 or something, right? I don't know what the context window for O1 is, but I'm definitely not going to get it. And it reasoned through whether or not that code has vulnerabilities, potential security issues, whatever. So I didn't even have to think about whether or not I'm scared to run this code. If it's open source, I just dumped this whole thing into this reasoning model and gave it some time to run it, and it gave me like a very thorough analysis of like what could possibly go wrong there. And I asked it what the app does. It tells me exactly what the app does. I would listen. I won't use the word scary. We're AI evangelists. I'm not here to scare you, but it's very good. It's very good. They didn't release a bunch of benchmarks.
Like competitive.
Yes,
they are extremely competitive with this one, and people haven't realized just how good it is. It was just the hardest questions I was giving. It was just getting them, like the math ones. The coding ones, it's okay. I mean, it's good. It's not bad, but it hasn't always been like the most reliable at writing code that works. However, with the right prompting and agentic setups or whatever people are going to do with it, this has from a practical use point of view, this is probably one of the better models right now.
They also show reasoning as well. So unlike OpenAI's O1 and kind of like R1 from DeepSeek, I really want to call this one G1 because I'm kind of tired of saying Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking Experimental 0121. Can we just name this G1 and be done with it? It's like R1, G1, O1. So
and for the Quen guys, they can just release it as Q1, and then we're good. And then we can just have Cloud 1,
and we're done.
Then it will be easier to differentiate, right? Just G1.
So let me land on this, Nathan. The thinking is open for this model. Unlike O1. The thinking, you can see the thinking, you can walk through it. You can get it in the API, the thinking processes, like the chain of thought itself. And the speed of this is way higher than what I saw from O1. Like this is like a thinking model that runs, just absolutely runs, mugs everybody else. So great release. Yeah, two last things, LDJ, super quick. One of them is Hunyuan 3D. If you guys remember Hunyuan video, HY video, which was like one of the probably best open source video models that we have, they released a 3D state-of-the-art 3D image to 3D and text to 2D model. And it looks so good. Just an absolute beauty of a model, state-of-the-art. You can generate 3D objects that look very cute. You can ask text to 3D or image to 3D, so you can upload the static image of a thing that you generated elsewhere in Imagen 3 or something. It's kind of slow, at least as far as I saw from the example, but I generated like this image of a turtle and just like looks so good. I saw some people with 3D printers already doing the pipeline of talking, generating, printing, which is just incredible that we're here. Beats every other model completely. So very cool model. So if you're into this, there's a few Twitter Hugging Face spaces for Hunyuan 3D version 2, and you can generate like 3D models fairly quick. The generation, it takes a while. The generation, the quality there is very good. This is the last one, and the thing that I talked to you about, ByteDance is releasing all kinds of stuff, including potentially a new reasoning model. ByteDance also released, this is under tools, and this is the last thing we're going to cover, a cursor competitor called Tray. And you download Tray from Tray.ai, If you are okay with your code being sent somewhere, you can download Tray from tray.ai, and this will import your configs from Cursor or VS Code, and will open an editor, an AI editor that kind of looks like this. It's kind of cute the way it looks. So like it's a VS Code clone that has a sidebar with the chat interface and the builder, which is kind of like a composer in Cursor, I guess. So also like an agentic type of things. They only support Claude 3.5 Sonnet and GPT-4o, but they support it for free right now. So I don't know why ByteDance is paying for your tokens, but they do. So if you don't pay for Cursor, or you don't want to, or you can't afford it, and you're okay with your like code getting shared with ByteDance, this is a good option for you. It did some of the stuff. It does pretty much the same things, right? It looks at the code, it edits it, it has a copilot mode as well, so it auto-completes things slower than Cursor, but it does autocomplete things. Very, very good. I didn't find some unique features. They have the edit feature, they have the chat feature. Very standard Cursor clone, but from ByteDance. So if you are into this, give Tray a try, and let us know. I think that this is our show for today, folks. And while we were talking, here's my 3D object that I was generated, the dragon skull. I'll show you super quick. Yeah. All right, folks, I think that this is a show for today. Meanwhile, go give R1 a try. The last thing that I will leave you with is this. I really want to try to leave you with this. R1 is so cute. And when I say cute, I mean, when you can see into its reasoning, you can see that it thinks, and all I asked it was, let me see if I'm sharing the right screen. Yes. All I asked it was, hey. I just said, hey. And then it reacted with this like long monologue about thinking about hey. And so I want to just show you what I did. I took this monologue and I just like posted about this and said, hey, R1 is so cute. Somebody replied, R1 is Woody Allen level of neurosis, because I wrote hey and then it replied with like, and then it thought for a long time how to respond to me, and eventually responded with like, hey, how can I assist you today? But the thinking process was like 3 paragraphs long. And so somebody responded, this is like Woody Allen level of neurosis. And so I actually went to Julio Voice, cloned Woody Allen's voice, and went to ByteDance Latent Sync, if you guys remember from a few weeks ago, the state-of-the-art lip syncing model. And I voiced how R1 would sound if it was voiced by Woody Allen. So we'll end on this. Thank you so much for joining ThursdAI. Here is R1, voiced by Woody Allen, with AI obviously, thinking how to reply to my prompt of saying hey. And we'll end on this. Thank you, folks. Let's listen.
So I am trying to figure out how to respond to this user. They just said, hey, I am supposed to be a helpful assistant, so come up with a good reply. Let me think about what they might need. First, maybe they're greeting me, so a friendly response would be nice. I could say something like, hey, how can I assist you today? That seems open and inviting. It gives them the chance to tell me what they need without me making assumptions. Alternatively, if they're looking for more specific help, I could ask what they need. But since they just said, hey, it's probably better to keep it general, I don't want to come off as too pushy. Wait, maybe I should consider if they're in a hurry. If they need something quickly, a short response might be better. But since I am supposed to be helpful, being a bit more engaging is probably the way to go. I also need to make sure my response is clear and not confusing. Using simple language is important. Maybe something like, hey, what can I do for you today? That's straightforward and shows willingness to help. Another thought, perhaps they're testing me to see if I am responsive. A quick friendly reply would reassure them that I am here and ready to help. So keeping it light and positive is key. I should also make sure not to overcomplicate things. Just a simple greeting and offer assistance. No need for extra details unless they ask for them. In summary, the best approach is to greet them back and offer my help. That way, they know I am here and ready to assist with whatever they need. Think, hey, how can I assist you today?
That's it. Eventually, the think part was it's ending the thinking tokens. Hey, how can I assist you today was the answer. Folks, thank you so much for joining. Don't overthink. too much. Enjoy R1. Enjoy the incredible things we received this week from open source. Thank you so much for joining ThursdAI. I hope I see you next week, and we're going to have some examples of programmer running already by then. Thank you so much. Tune in to the podcast. Leave us 5 stars everywhere, and we'll see you here next week. Bye-bye, everyone.